The mountain man inherited 50 orphans from a burned place, and the fat girl became their mother. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September 1829, carried by a circuit rider who'd spent 3 weeks tracking Caleb McKenna through the Missouri wilderness. Caleb was checking his trap lines along the Gasconade River when he heard the horse approaching unusual enough to make him reach for his rifle before he recognized the rider as Jonas Wheeler, the postal carrier who serviced the scattered settlements between Franklin and the Western Territories. "Got something for you, McKenna," Jonas called out, waving a sealed envelope. "From a lawyer in Boonslick. Been looking for you for near a month." Caleb took the letter with hands still stained from skinning a beaver. The wax seal bore an official stamp he didn't recognize. He wasn't a man accustomed to correspondence. Most folks who needed him knew where to find him, and written words had never been his strength. He'd spent the last 15 years in these mountains, trapping, hunting, and living a life that asked nothing of him but survival skills and solitude. "You gonna read it, or just stare at it?" Jonas asked, swinging down from his horse. Caleb broke the seal and unfolded the thick paper. The words swam before his eyes, legal terms he barely understood, clauses and whereases that meant nothing to him. But certain phrases stood out like brands on hide. Henrietta McKenna, deceased, sole beneficiary, 50 orphaned children, immediate action required. His aunt, Aunt Hattie, who'd raised him after his parents died of fever when he was 8. The woman who'd fed him, clothed him, and eventually watched him leave at 16 to become a mountain man, understanding even then that civilization would never hold him. He hadn't seen her in 12 years, though he'd heard she'd opened an orphanage near St. Charles with money inherited from her late husband. "Bad news?" Jonas asked. "My aunt's dead," Caleb said, his voice flat, "and apparently she's left me 50 children." Jonas let out a low whistle. 50? That's a considerable inheritance. Caleb read further, his jaw tightening with each line. The orphanage had burned down 3 weeks ago. Henrietta had died trying to save the children, managing to get them all out before the smoke took her. Her will, written 5 years prior, named Caleb as executor of her estate and guardian of all children in her care. The lawyer, a Mr. Bartholomew Sykes, requested his immediate presence in St. Charles to settle affairs. "I can't do this," Caleb muttered. "I don't know the first damn thing about children." "Well," Jonas said, settling against a tree, "I reckon you'd better learn fast. Law's the law, McKenna. And that letter says if you don't claim them within 30 days, they'll be dispersed as indentured servants to whoever'll take them." The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. Indentured servitude was slavery in all but name children bound to masters who could work them like animals, beat them, starve them, with no recourse until their terms were served. Some never lived that long. He thought of Aunt Hattie, who'd taken him in when no one else would, who'd never made him feel like a burden, even when he'd been a wild, angry boy prone to fighting and running off. She'd shown him the only real kindness he'd known in his early years. "Damn it," he said softly. 3 days later, Caleb rode into St. Charles with all his worldly possessions packed on 2 mules. The town had grown since he'd last seen it. More buildings, more people, more of the civilization he'd spent years avoiding. The lawyer's office stood on Main Street, a neat clapboard building with painted shutters that seemed to judge him as he dismounted. Mr. Sykes was a thin man with spectacles and the patient expression of someone who dealt with difficult situations daily. He gestured Caleb to a chair and laid out the circumstances with professional detachment. Your aunt was a remarkable woman, Mr. McKenna. She ran the Pine Valley Orphanage for 11 years, taking in children no one else would. Most of them came from dire circumstances, parents dead from disease, poverty, violence. Some were abandoned. Some were found wandering alone after their families died on the trail west. "How did the fire start?" Caleb asked. "Lamp oil, we believe. Knocked over during the night. The building was old, wood frame. It went up fast." Sykes paused, his professional mask slipping for a moment. "Your aunt got every child out. Then she went back in for the ledgers and records. She said she wouldn't let them lose their names and histories. The roof collapsed." Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. That was exactly like Hattie, practical even in crisis, thinking about what those children would need to prove who they were, where they'd come from. Where are they now? The children? Temporarily housed in a warehouse at the edge of town. The church ladies have been taking turns providing meals, but it's difficult. 50 children ranging from 3 to 15 years old, all traumatized, grieving, and frightened. They need a permanent solution, Mr. McKenna, and according to your aunt's will, you're it. Sykes slid a document across the desk. "This is the full inventory of your inheritance. The property where the orphanage stood 5 acres, now just burned ruins. Your aunt's personal savings, which amounts to approximately $300. And the children themselves, legally in your custody until they reach majority or are otherwise placed." Caleb looked at the list of names, 50 of them, each written in Hattie's careful script, with notations beside them. Mary Carlson, age 14, parents died, Oregon Trail, 1825. Good with numbers. Thomas Wade, age 7, father murdered mother in drunken rage, 1827, stutters when frightened. Little Sarah, age 3, found abandoned roadside, 1828, doesn't speak yet. Each name was a life, a story, a responsibility he'd never asked for. "I can't do this alone," Caleb said. "I live in the wilderness. I trap and hunt. I don't even have a house, just a lean-to and a trapping cabin. How am I supposed to care for 50 children?" "That's your concern to solve, Mr. McKenna. But I'll be frank with you, if you refuse this inheritance, those children will be dispersed within the week. There are already families and business owners who've expressed interest in taking them as servants. Not all of those situations would be kind." "You mean they'd be worked like slaves?" "I mean exactly that. Farm labor, mill work, domestic service, these children would be valuable assets to people who see them only as free labor. Your aunt knew this. That's why she named you. She believed you were a good man, despite your rough living. She wrote a letter to accompany the will." Sykes handed him a sealed envelope with his name and Hattie's handwriting. Caleb broke the seal with trembling fingers. "Dear Caleb, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably angry at me for putting this burden on your shoulders. You have every right to be. 50 children is no small thing, especially for a man who chose the wilderness over civilization. But I've watched you grow from that angry boy into a good man. You think you're not fit for family because you prefer solitude, but I know different. You saved Jonas Wheeler's boy from drowning 3 years ago. You tracked down the Simmons girl when she wandered off and got lost. You leave deer meat at Widow Patterson's door every winter. You care, Caleb. You just do it quietly, in your own way. These children need someone who understands what it means to be cast aside, someone who knows how to survive, and someone who won't give up on them. You're the only person I trust with them. I'm not asking you to be their father. God knows that's too much to ask anyone. I'm asking you to keep them safe and together. That's all. Keep them together. With love, your Aunt Hattie Caleb folded the letter and stood. Take me to them. The warehouse was a low brick building that smelled of old grain and mildew. When Sykes opened the door, the noise hit Caleb like a physical wave, crying, shouting, laughing, the chaotic sound of 50 children crammed into a space designed for cargo, not people. The scene inside made his heart sink. Children of all ages clustered in groups on the floor. The youngest ones clung to older children who looked barely old enough to care for themselves. Makeshift bedding blankets and hay covered the ground. A few church ladies moved among them, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. The moment Caleb entered, the noise died down. 50 pairs of eyes turned to stare at him, this tall, bearded stranger in buckskins who smelled of wood smoke and the wild. "Who's that?" a small voice asked. "Is he taking us away?" "I don't want to go." One of the church ladies, a stern woman with gray hair, approached. "Are you the nephew? About time someone came. We can't keep doing this. These children are impossible to manage." "They're scared and grieving," Caleb said quietly. "That's not the same as impossible." "Well, perhaps you'll have better luck," she said, though her tone suggested she doubted it. "We've done our Christian duty, but we have our own families to tend to. You have until Sunday, that's 4 days, to make other arrangements, or the marshal will start dispersing them." After the ladies left, Caleb stood alone with 50 children staring at him. He'd tracked panthers through winter storms, survived grizzly attacks, and once spent 3 days trapped in a snow cave with nothing but his knife and wits. But this moment, facing these children, was the most terrifying experience of his life. "All right," he said, his voice rough. "I'm Caleb McKenna. I was your headmistress' nephew. I know you're scared. I know you miss Miss Hattie. And I know I'm not what any of you expected." Silence. Then a girl of about 14 stood up. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that held more pain than any child should carry. "Are you going to split us up?" "No," Caleb said, though he had no idea how he'd keep that promise. "Miss Hattie asked me to keep you together, so that's what I'm going to do." "How?" The question came from a boy of about 12, lanky and suspicious. "You're just one man. You can't take care of all of us." "You're right," Caleb admitted. "I can't, not alone, but maybe together we can figure something out." He spent the rest of the day trying to bring order to chaos. He learned names, though keeping track of 50 was impossible. Mary Carlson was the 14-year-old girl who'd spoken first. She'd apparently been Miss Hattie's main helper with the younger children. The suspicious boy was Thomas Wade, who stuttered badly when nervous, but seemed to have a natural talent for organizing the other boys. There was little Sarah, just 3, who hadn't spoken since being found abandoned. The twins, Emma and Eliza, age 10, who finished each other's sentences. Young Benjamin, age 5, who cried constantly for his dead mother. Annie, age 8, who'd been beaten so badly by her father that one arm hung crooked. Samuel, age 15, the oldest, who watched everything with wary eyes and kept the other big boys in line. By nightfall, Caleb was exhausted. He'd broken up 6 fights, cleaned up after 2 children who'd gotten sick from bad food, and tried to comfort more crying youngsters than he could count. The children finally settled into restless sleep, but he sat awake, watching over them, wondering what the hell he was going to do. He couldn't take them into the wilderness, that was clear. He couldn't afford to house and feed 50 children in town on $300. He couldn't manage them alone. Every option he considered led to a dead end. Around midnight, he heard soft footsteps. Mary Carlson sat down beside him. "You're not going to be able to do this alone," she said quietly. "I know." Miss Hattie, she was amazing. She could calm the littlest ones with a song, teach the middle ones their letters, and keep the big ones in line all at once. She made it look easy, but it wasn't. She was exhausted every night. How did she manage? "She loved us," Mary said simply, "and she had help. There was Mrs. Patterson, who came twice a week to help with laundry, and Mr. Chen taught us gardening. And Prudence from the church came every day to help cook. Prudence, she's nice, really nice. She's the one who always remembered everyone's favorite foods, who sat with us when we had nightmares. The other church ladies, they helped because it was their duty. But Prudence helped because she cared." Caleb filed that information away. "Mary, what happened to you? Before the orphanage?" She was quiet for a long moment. "My parents took the Oregon Trail when I was 4. Pa got cholera 3 weeks in, died in a day. Ma tried to keep going, but the wagon master said she couldn't continue alone with a child. He told her to turn back or find another man to marry fast. She wouldn't do either. One night, she just disappeared, took me to a settlement, and left me there. I was found wandering 2 days later. I'm sorry. Miss Hattie told us all that our stories didn't define us, that what we did going forward mattered more than what happened before. She believed that." Mary looked at him. "Do you?" Caleb thought about his own story, orphaned, angry, running to the mountains to escape everything. "I want to," he said honestly. The next morning, he tried to establish some kind of routine. He divided the children by age groups and appointed the older ones as leaders of the younger. He inventoried their belongings, pitifully few. He tried to organize meal times, but the church ladies' donations were running thin, and the children were still hungry after eating. By the second day, chaos reigned again. The children, sensing his inexperience, tested every boundary. They fought over blankets, refused to share food, ran wild through the warehouse. Little Sarah's constant crying set off other children. Benjamin wet himself and was mocked by the older boys until he sobbed. Annie had a nightmare and screamed so loudly she woke everyone at 2 in the morning. Caleb tried everything he could think of. He used his firm voice, the one that worked on grown men, but children just stared at him with tear-streaked faces. He tried organizing activities, but half the children wouldn't participate, and the other half fought over who went first. He attempted to comfort the crying ones, but his awkward pats just made them cry harder. By the third day, he was ready to break. He sat outside the warehouse in the cold morning air, his head in his hands, wondering if he should just let the children be dispersed. Maybe some of them would find good homes. Maybe they'd be better off than staying with a mountain man who had no idea what he was doing. "Excuse me." He looked up to see a woman standing before him. She was large, not just heavy, but solidly built, with a round face and kind eyes. Her dress was simple and worn, her apron stained from kitchen work. She held a basket covered with a cloth. "Are you Mr. McKenna? The one Miss Hattie left the children to? Yeah. He stood up, suddenly conscious of how he must look unshaven, exhausted, probably smelling of desperation. I'm Prudence Webb. I worked with Miss Hattie at the orphanage, helped with cooking and such. I heard you were struggling, and I thought maybe, well, I brought some proper food for the children, not just the scraps the church ladies have been sending. She lifted the cloth to reveal fresh bread, a pot of stew, and a dozen apples. The smell made Caleb's stomach growl. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten properly. "Thank you," he said, meaning it more than she could know. I can't pay you much right now. I don't want payment." Prudence looked toward the warehouse door, from which the sound of chaos emerged. "I want to help. Miss Hattie was good to me. I'd like to do right by her children." "Just for today?" Caleb asked, hope and desperation mixing in his voice. "Let's start with today and see what happens." Prudence Webb walked into that warehouse like she was walking into a familiar home. She set down her basket, surveyed the chaos with calm eyes, and then did something Caleb hadn't thought of. She sang. It wasn't a hymn or anything religious. It was a simple tune, something about sunshine and morning. But her voice was clear and sweet, and one by one the children stopped what they were doing and turned to look at her. "Good morning, darlings," she said, smiling at them. "I've brought breakfast, but before we eat, let's get this place sorted out, shall we? I'll need helpers. Who wants to help me?" Every hand shot up. Within an hour, Prudence had organized what Caleb couldn't manage in 3 days. She divided the children into work groups, some to fold blankets, some to sweep, some to organize the limited supplies. She appointed Mary and Thomas as her lieutenants, giving them real authority and responsibility. She sat little Sarah on her ample lap and fed her by hand, talking to her softly, until the child stopped crying and actually smiled. While the children worked, she taught them songs, simple ones that turned chores into games. By the time the warehouse was clean, everyone was singing, and the atmosphere had completely changed. Then came breakfast. Prudence served the stew and bread, making sure the youngest ate first, praising children who shared, firmly correcting those who tried to take more than their portion. It was the first real meal they'd had in days, and children actually thanked her as they ate. Caleb watched in amazement. "How did you do that?" Prudence wiped Emma's face with a cloth and smiled. "Children need structure and love, Mr. McKenna. Give them both, and they'll surprise you." "I gave them structure." "No, you gave them rules. There's a difference. Structure means predictable routine, clear expectations, and consistent follow-through. Rules are just things to break." She stayed the whole day, and by evening, the children had settled into something resembling peace. The younger ones actually went to sleep without crying. The older ones sat quietly, some reading by lamplight, others talking in low voices. "I should go," Prudence said, as the last child drifted off. "I have to be at the church kitchen early tomorrow." Could you come back?" Caleb asked. "I know I have no right to ask, but I'll come tomorrow," Prudence said, "and the day after, until we figure something more permanent out." "Why?" Caleb asked, genuinely confused. "You don't know me. These aren't your children." Prudence looked at the sleeping forms scattered around the warehouse. "Miss Hattie gave me my first job when no one else would hire me. Said I was too fat to be a proper housemaid, too plain to work in a shop. But she saw that I was good with children and good in a kitchen. She gave me dignity when the world had taken it away." She met his eyes. "These children need someone, and I need to be needed. So yes, Mr. McKenna, I'll be back tomorrow." She left him there, standing among 50 sleeping children, feeling the first stirring of something that might have been hope. Prudence didn't just come back the next day. She arrived at dawn with a wagon full of supplies purchased with her own meager savings: oats for breakfast, vegetables for stew, soap for washing, and a determination that brooked no argument. "We can't keep them in this warehouse," she announced, surveying the space with a critical eye. "It's cold, damp, and unsuitable for children. What about the property where the orphanage stood?" "It's just burned ruins," Caleb said. "But it's still your property, isn't it?" 5 acres, the lawyer said. "Land is land. We could rebuild." "With what money?" "I've got $300. That might feed 50 children for a few months if we're careful, but it won't build a new orphanage." Prudence nodded thoughtfully. "Then we don't build an orphanage. We build something different, something that can sustain itself." She outlined her idea while they prepared breakfast together, the first of many tasks they'd share in the coming weeks. Instead of a traditional orphanage dependent on charity, they'd create a working farm where the children learned practical skills. The older ones could help with heavy labor. The middle ones could tend gardens and animals. The younger ones could do lighter chores. They'd grow their own food, raise chickens and pigs, maybe even a few cows if they could afford it. "It's not charity if they're earning their keep," Prudence explained. "And it teaches them skills they'll need when they're grown. How many orphans leave institutions with no idea how to support themselves?" "You've thought about this a lot." "I've had time, and I've seen what happens to orphans who age out with nothing. The boys end up as drifters or criminals. The girls end up, well, they end up in bad situations. This way, they'd have skills, knowledge, and maybe even a trade." Caleb considered it. He knew farming, though he'd never done it on a large scale. He knew animal husbandry from his trapping days, and he knew construction. Any mountain man who couldn't build a shelter didn't last long. "It could work," he admitted, "but we'd need more than $300 to get started." "Then we'll raise it. St. Charles has plenty of wealthy folks who might donate to a worthy cause, and the church always has money for charity." Over the next week, while Prudence managed the children, Caleb worked on securing their future. He met with town leaders, presenting Prudence's farm orphanage concept. Some were skeptical. A mountain man raising 50 children seemed like a recipe for disaster. But others, particularly those who'd known Henrietta McKenna and respected her work, were willing to help. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Josiah Blackwood, one of the town's wealthiest merchants, had a daughter who'd been sickly as a child. Henrietta had taken her in for a summer when the family went east for medical treatment, caring for the girl as if she were her own. "My Charlotte survived that summer," Blackwood told Caleb. "Your aunt nursed her, loved her, and sent her back to us healthier than she'd ever been. I owe Henrietta McKenna a debt I can never repay, but perhaps I can honor her memory." He donated $200 and promised materials for construction at cost. Other donations followed: lumber, tools, seed for planting, even a few chickens and a pregnant sow. The town baker agreed to teach the older children bread making. A widow with a large garden offered to show them proper planting techniques. By the end of October, they had enough to begin. Caleb took the older boys, Samuel, Thomas, and 6 others, out to the property where the orphanage had burned. The ruins were worse than he'd imagined. Charred timbers jutted up like broken bones. The smell of smoke still lingered. He could see where Hattie had tried to save her records. A metal box lay among the ashes, warped from heat. "This is where Miss Hattie died," Samuel said quietly. The boy was 15, nearly grown, with shoulders already broad from work. "She went back in for us, for our papers, so we'd still have our names." "She did," Caleb confirmed, "and we're going to build something here that honors that sacrifice." They spent the first day just clearing debris. It was hard, dirty work, but the boys attacked it with surprising vigor. As they worked, Caleb began to see the potential not just of the land, but of the children themselves. Samuel was a natural leader, organizing the others without being bossy. Thomas, despite his stutter, had a sharp eye for structural problems. Even young Peter, just 11, worked with a determination that spoke of wanting to prove himself. By evening, they'd cleared enough space to lay a foundation, but Caleb realized they needed more help. 8 boys, no matter how willing, couldn't build an entire farmstead before winter. That night, he told Prudence his concern. She was feeding little Sarah dinner. The child still wouldn't speak, but she'd bonded to Prudence with fierce attachment. "Put out word that you're hiring," Prudence said. "There are men in town who need work. Pay them what you can, and when you can't pay them, feed them. A working man who gets a good meal is a grateful man." She was right. Caleb hired 4 men veterans of Indian wars and trading expeditions who'd fallen on hard times. He paid them modest wages and Prudence's cooking, which turned out to be worth more than money. Her meals were legendary hearty stews, fresh bread, pies made from preserved fruits. The men worked like demons for the promise of dinner. Within 3 weeks, they'd erected a large barn-like structure that would serve as communal living space for the winter. It wasn't fancy, one large room with a loft for sleeping, a central fireplace for heat and cooking, long tables for meals. But it was solid, weatherproof, and most importantly, it was theirs. The children moved in on a cold November day. Prudence had organized everything: sleeping areas divided by age and gender, a study corner with the few books they possessed, a play area for the youngest. As the children explored their new home, their excitement was palpable. For the first time since the fire, they had something that felt like stability. That night, as 50 children settled into their new quarters, Caleb stood outside with Prudence, watching snow begin to fall. "We did it," he said, his breath fogging in the cold air. "We did," Prudence agreed, "but this is just the beginning. Winter's coming, and we'll need food, firewood, and supplies to last until spring. I can hunt, I've got my traps, I can provide meat, and I can preserve it, cook it, make it stretch. The older girls can learn too. Mary's already showing talent in the kitchen." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the snow accumulate. Caleb had spent 15 years avoiding exactly this kind of responsibility, and yet here he was, guardian to 50 children, partner to a woman he barely knew, building something permanent when he'd always sworn he'd stay free. And somehow, it didn't feel like a trap. It felt like purpose. "Prudence," he said carefully, "why are you really doing this? You could work anywhere, for wages that don't depend on charity and hope. Why stay?" She was quiet for a long moment, her round face peaceful in the falling snow. "Because I spent my whole life being told I was too much, too fat, too plain, too unmarriageable. Every job I got was temporary, every position contingent on there being no one better. Miss Hattie was the first person who valued me for what I could do, not despite what I looked like. And these children, they don't care that I'm fat or plain. They just care that I'm here, that I'm steady, that I love them. That's worth more than any wage. Caleb understood. He'd spent years in the wilderness partly because he'd never fit in civilized society. Too rough, too direct, too comfortable with violence. But these children didn't need civilization. They needed someone strong, capable, and willing to protect them. They needed exactly who he was. "We make a good team," he said. Prudence smiled. "Yes, we do." Winter came hard and fast that year. By December, snow lay 3 feet deep, and temperatures plunged below freezing most nights. But inside their communal building, life took on a rhythm that felt almost normal. Caleb took the older boys hunting and trapping, teaching them skills that could keep them alive anywhere. Samuel proved to be a natural marksman. Thomas learned to read tracks in snow. Peter had the patience for trapping, checking lines in bitter cold without complaint. Prudence ran the household with military efficiency. She'd organized the girls into teams cooking, cleaning, laundry, child care. Mary became her second in command, showing a gift for organization and a gentle touch with the younger children. Annie, despite her crooked arm, was surprisingly good at mending clothes. The twins, Emma and Eliza, had beautiful singing voices and led evening songs that kept spirits high. Even little Sarah began to thrive. She still didn't speak, but she started helping with simple tasks, always staying close to Prudence. And one morning in January, when Prudence was making bread, Sarah pointed to the flour and said clearly, "Mama?" Prudence froze, her hands deep in dough. "What did you say, sweetheart?" "Mama," Sarah repeated, looking up at her with complete trust. Prudence sat down hard, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, my darling girl. Yes, yes, I'm here." From that day forward, Sarah called Prudence Mama and Caleb Papa, and somehow that felt right. Other children began following suit, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. Not all of them, Samuel and Mary, older and carrying memories of real parents, still called them by their given names. But the younger ones needed that connection, and Caleb and Prudence gave it freely. The problem that would change everything arrived in March, just as the snow began to melt. A delegation from town rode out to the farm, 3 men Caleb recognized as prominent citizens, including Josiah Blackwood's lawyer, a sanctimonious man named Cornelius Finch. "Mr. McKenna," Finch said, dismounting with obvious distaste for the muddy yard. "We need to discuss a delicate matter." They gathered in the communal room, the children sent outside to play despite the cold. Finch looked around the space with barely concealed disapproval at the sleeping pallets, the long tables, the functional simplicity of everything. "Mr. McKenna, Miss Webb," he began, his tone suggesting he was about to deliver bad news he secretly enjoyed. "Questions have been raised about the propriety of your arrangement here." "What questions?" Caleb asked, his mountain man instincts prickling with danger. "You and Miss Webb are unmarried, yet you live together under one roof, caring for children. There have been complaints, legitimate complaints, about the moral example this sets, about the impropriety of the situation." "We're not living together in any improper sense," Prudence said, her face flushing. "We're caring for orphans. There are 50 children here who need supervision." "The appearance of impropriety is as damaging as impropriety itself," Finch said smoothly. The church council has discussed this matter at length. Unless you can prove that your relationship is morally sound, by which we mean sanctified by marriage, will be forced to take action." "What kind of action?" Caleb asked, though he already knew. "The children would be removed from your custody and dispersed to approved families. This would happen within 30 days, unless you can rectify the situation." Caleb felt rage building in his chest, the same rage that had made him leave civilization in the first place. These children have a home here. They're safe, fed, learning skills they'll need. You want to rip them away from the only stability they've had since the fire because of appearance? "We want to ensure they're raised in a morally appropriate environment," Finch said. "And frankly, Mr. McKenna, a mountain man and a spinster living together without marriage, raising 50 children in a barn is hardly—" "Cornelius, that's enough!" The voice came from behind Finch. Josiah Blackwood had been silent until now, but he stood up, his face grave. "Caleb, Prudence, I apologize for Cornelius's tone, but he's right about the law. The state of Missouri has clear regulations about custody and guardianship. An unmarried couple cannot legally serve as co-guardians of minor children." "So what are you suggesting?" Prudence asked quietly. "Marriage," Blackwood said simply. "It doesn't have to be. Well, it could be an arrangement on paper only. But legally, it would give you both the protection you need to keep the children." Caleb and Prudence looked at each other across the room. They'd worked together for 5 months, built something from nothing, become partners in the truest sense. But marriage? That was a bond Caleb had never considered, a permanence he'd avoided his entire adult life. "Could we have a moment to discuss this?" Prudence asked. The men stepped outside. Caleb and Prudence stood in the suddenly quiet room, the weight of the decision between them. "I won't force you into this," Caleb said. "If you want to walk away, I'll understand. Hell, you could probably keep the children if you found a proper husband." "I don't want a proper husband," Prudence interrupted. I want what we've built here, this partnership, these children. But Caleb, I won't trap you. You're a free man. You chose the wilderness for a reason. I won't be the cage that holds you." Caleb thought about the past 5 months, about waking each morning to Prudence's singing, to children's laughter, about teaching the boys to hunt, watching Mary blossom into a confident young woman, seeing little Sarah finally smile, about building something with his own hands that would last beyond his lifetime. Was it freedom he'd found in the mountains, or just loneliness dressed up as independence? "If we do this," he said slowly, "it should be real, not just on paper. I won't dishonor you by making you my wife in name only." Prudence's eyes widened. "You mean—" "I mean we do this properly, or not at all. We build a real marriage, a real family, not because the law says we have to, but because—" he struggled for words, "because I want to. Because what we have here, it's worth more than any freedom I had before." "Caleb McKenna," Prudence said, tears gathering in her eyes, "are you proposing to me?" "Yeah," he said, managing a rough smile. "I guess I am, even if I'm doing it backwards and under pressure and probably saying all the wrong things." "You're saying exactly the right things." Prudence crossed the room and took his hands. "Yes, I'll marry you, for real, for better or worse." "It'll probably be worse," Caleb warned. "I'm rough, I'm not educated, She kissed him, cutting off his protests. It was her first kiss, and his awkward, brief, but achingly genuine. "We'll figure it out together," she said. That's what partners do. They called the men back in and announced their decision. Cornelius Finch looked disappointed that his moral crusade would have no teeth. But Josiah Blackwood smiled genuinely for the first time that day. "I'll arrange everything," he said. "And Caleb, I think Henrietta would be proud of what you're building here." The wedding took place 1 week later in the small church in St. Charles. All 50 children attended, scrubbed and dressed in their best clothes. Mary stood up as Prudence's attendant. Samuel stood with Caleb, grave and solemn, as if he understood the weight of the moment. The ceremony was simple. Caleb wore clean buckskins having no proper suit. Prudence wore a blue dress borrowed from one of the church ladies, altered to fit her generous figure. She'd never looked more beautiful to him than in that moment, round face glowing, eyes bright with tears and joy. When the minister asked, "Do you, Caleb McKenna, take Prudence Webb to be your lawfully wedded wife?" he answered without hesitation, "I do." And when Prudence answered the same, her voice steady and sure, Caleb felt something he'd never experienced before, the sense of finally being exactly where he was meant to be. At the reception afterward, hosted in the communal hall at the farm, the children ran wild with joy. There was music. Someone had brought a fiddle and dancing. Caleb danced with Prudence, awkwardly but earnestly, while children laughed and clapped. He danced with Mary, who whispered, "Take care of her. She's the best person I've ever known." He even managed a few steps with little Sarah, who giggled and called him Papa. As evening fell and the guests departed, Caleb and Prudence stood together, watching the children settle in for the night. They'd built a small private room off the main hall, not much, just enough for a bed and a chest of drawers, but it was theirs. "Are you frightened?" Caleb asked quietly. "Terrified," Prudence admitted. I'm 28 years old and I've never—" "Neither have I," Caleb said. "Not really. Not like this, with someone who matters." They entered their small room and closed the door on the world. What passed between them that night was private, tender, and entirely their own. But when morning came, they emerged as something more than they'd been before, not just partners, but husband and wife in every sense that mattered. Spring brought new challenges and opportunities. As the snow melted and the ground thawed, they began preparing the land for farming. Caleb taught the older boys to plow and plant. Prudence taught the girls to tend seedlings and start a kitchen garden. The younger children had lighter tasks, collecting eggs from the chickens, feeding the pigs, pulling weeds. The farm began to take shape. They planted corn, wheat, and vegetables. They built proper chicken coops and a pigsty. Caleb even managed to acquire 2 milk cows. Trading a winter's worth of pelts for them, the older children learned to milk, churn butter, and make cheese under Prudence's patient instruction. But not everything went smoothly. In late April, a group of men rode up to the farm, rough types Caleb recognized from his mountain days. Their leader was a man named Silas Crenshaw, a trader who'd always operated on the wrong side of legal. "Heard you got yourself a whole passel of orphans, McKenna," Crenshaw said, looking around at the children working in the fields. "Heard some of 'em are old enough to work proper." "They're children, not labor," Caleb said coldly, "and they're under my protection." "Well, now that's interesting, because I got a business proposition. I need workers for my lumber operation up north. Strong boys, ages 12 and up. I'd pay good money for 'em, say $20 a head per year, plus room and board." "They're not for sale." Crenshaw's expression hardened. Listen, McKenna, you can't keep all these brats forever. They're a drain on resources, and you know it. I'm offering to take some off your hands and pay you for the privilege. That's better than most orphans get." "The answer is no. Now get off my property." For a moment, Caleb thought Crenshaw would challenge him, but the mountain man's reputation still held weight, and Crenshaw could see that Caleb was armed and ready. He spat on the ground and rode off with his men, but not before saying, "You're making a mistake, McKenna. Those kids would be better off with someone who can actually afford them." After they left, Prudence emerged from the house where she'd been watching. "He'll be back," she said. "Men like that don't give up easy." "Let him come. He'll find I'm not easy either." But the encounter troubled Caleb. Crenshaw was right about one thing: the farm was barely breaking even. The crops wouldn't be ready for months. Their savings were nearly exhausted, and feeding 50 children, even with everyone working hard, was expensive. That night, he discussed the finances with Prudence. She'd been keeping meticulous records, and the numbers were sobering. At their current rate, they'd run out of money by midsummer unless something changed. "We need another source of income," Prudence said, "something beyond farming." "Like what?" She considered. "The older girls and I have been making preserves from the early berries, and my bread is something people compliment. What if we started selling our surplus? Not just produce, but finished goods. Jams, breads, butter, cheese, things people in town would pay for." "It could work," Caleb agreed, "and I can still trap and hunt. Pelts bring good money." They implemented the plan immediately. Twice a week, Mary and 2 other older girls took a wagon to town, selling Prudence's goods at the market. The response was enthusiastic. Her bread sold out within an hour, and people specifically asked for her strawberry preserves. Caleb supplemented their income with hunting and trapping, often taking the older boys. He taught them to track deer, to set snares, to read the wilderness. These expeditions became bonding time, and the boys began to see him not just as a guardian, but as a father figure, stern but fair, demanding but patient. Meanwhile, Prudence worked miracles in the household. She'd organized a proper schoolroom where the older children taught the younger ones reading, writing, and arithmetic. She insisted that education was as important as work, and Caleb agreed. "Miss Hattie wanted you to have futures," she told the children. "That means you need knowledge as well as skills." As summer arrived, the farm began to flourish. The crops grew tall and healthy. The chickens laid abundantly. The pigs fattened nicely. And the children, all 50 of them, seemed to thrive in this environment where they were valued, taught, and loved. It was in July that everything changed. A well-dressed stranger arrived at the farm in an expensive carriage. He introduced himself as Mr. Edward Thornton, a merchant from St. Louis. He was looking for a girl, his daughter, who'd been kidnapped 10 years ago when she was 4 years old. "I've been searching ever since," Thornton said, his voice heavy with years of grief. "I hired investigators, posted rewards, followed every lead. Most led nowhere. But recently, I learned that a child matching her description had been brought to an orphanage in this area around that time." Prudence's face went pale. "What was your daughter's name?" "Catherine. Catherine Thornton. But she might not remember. She was so young when she was taken." "Do you have any identifying marks? Anything we could use to—" "A birthmark," Thornton said, "on her left shoulder blade, shaped like a crescent moon." Prudence and Caleb exchanged glances. Mary Carlson had exactly such a birthmark. They'd seen it countless times when helping the girls with bathing or treating minor injuries. "I think," Caleb said carefully, "you might want to meet one of our children. But, sir, I need to warn you, if this is your daughter, she doesn't remember you. She has a life here now. People who care about her." "I understand," Thornton said, though his hands were shaking. "I just want to see her, to know she's alive and well." They called Mary from the kitchen, where she'd been teaching younger girls to make pie crust. She came in, wiping flour from her hands, curious about the fancy visitor. When she saw Thornton, she froze. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Thornton's eyes filled with tears. "Catherine," he whispered. "My name is Mary," she said firmly. "Mary Carlson." May I see your left shoulder?" Thornton asked. Mary looked at Prudence, who nodded gently. Reluctantly, Mary turned and pulled down her dress just enough to reveal the crescent-shaped birthmark. Thornton made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. "It's you! My God, it's really you! Catherine, my darling girl, I've been searching for you for 10 years. But Mary stepped back, her face confused and frightened. I don't remember you. I don't remember anyone from before the orphanage." Over the next hour, sitting at the long table while other children gave them privacy, Thornton told his story. His wife had died when Catherine was 2. He'd raised her alone with the help of servants. One day, while the family was at a market in St. Louis, his daughter had disappeared. Taken, he later learned, by a woman desperate for a child of her own. The woman had traveled west, keeping Catherine for over a year before abandoning her when the child became too difficult to manage. "I never stopped looking," Thornton said, tears streaming down his face. "Never stopped hoping. And now I've found you, and you're alive and well, and I can finally—" He trailed off, seeing the expression on Mary's face, not joy or recognition, but uncertainty and fear. "What do you want from me?" Mary asked quietly. "I want you to come home. I want to give you the life you should have had. Fine dresses, education, society. Everything I couldn't give you these past 10 years. But I have a home," Mary said. "I have education. I have people who love me. I'm your father." "You're a stranger," Mary said, not unkindly but firmly. "Sir, I'm sorry for what happened to you. I'm sorry someone took your daughter, but I don't remember being Catherine Thornton. I only remember being Mary Carlson, the girl Miss Hattie took in when she was found wandering and alone. I remember Prudence teaching me to bake, and Caleb showing me how to track deer, and little Sarah calling me her big sister. That's my family." Thornton looked stricken. "But you're my daughter. You're my flesh and blood." Caleb spoke up. "Mr. Thornton, I understand how you feel, but you can't force this. Mary is 14 years old enough to have some say in her own life." "I have legal rights," Thornton insisted. "She's my child." "Actually," Prudence said quietly, "according to the law, she's Caleb's ward. Henrietta McKenna's will made him legal guardian of all the children in her care. You'd have to challenge that in court, and that could take months or years." Thornton stood abruptly, his face a mixture of anger and despair. "I won't give up. She's my daughter, and I will fight for her." He left, but his carriage remained visible at the property line. Clearly, he wasn't going far. Mary broke down crying after he left. Prudence held her while she sobbed out her confusion and fear. "I don't want to leave. This is my home. You're my family. Why can't he just understand that? Because he loves you, Prudence said gently. He loved you when you were Catherine, and that love never died. That's a powerful thing, darling. But I don't love him. I don't even know him. The situation remained tense for days. Thornton returned daily, trying to talk to Mary, to build some connection. He brought gifts, beautiful dresses, books, even a pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother. But Mary refused them all. I don't need fine things, she told him. I need the people I love and the life I've built. Finally, after a week of stalemate, Caleb sat down with Thornton, away from the children. Sir, you're going about this wrong, Caleb said. You're trying to bribe a girl who doesn't care about material things. You're asserting legal rights to a child who values emotional bonds. If you really want a relationship with your daughter, you need to respect who she is now, not try to make her into who she was. What would you have me do? Thornton asked, exhausted. Walk away from my own child? No, but maybe accept that she needs time, that she needs to come to you willingly, not because the law forces her. And maybe understand that loving her means wanting what's best for her, even if that's not what you originally planned. Thornton was silent for a long time. Then he said, Tell me about her, about who she is now, about Mary. So Caleb did. He told Thornton about Mary's gift for organization, how she'd become Prudence's right hand in running the household, about her gentle way with younger children, her quick mind for numbers, her growing skill in the kitchen, about how she taught other girls to read, how she sang lullabies to little Sarah, how she'd once tracked a lost child through the woods for 3 hours until she found him safe. She's remarkable, Caleb said. Strong, kind, capable. Your daughter became an amazing young woman, Mr. Thornton. You should be proud of her. I am, Thornton said, his voice breaking. I wish I'd been part of it. Maybe you still can be. Not as the father who demands she return to her old life, but as someone who wants to be part of her new one. That evening, Thornton approached Mary again, but this time he didn't bring gifts or assertions of legal right. Instead, he simply sat down with her at the long table and said, Tell me about your life, Mary. I want to understand who you've become. Cautiously at first, then with growing confidence, Mary shared her story. She talked about her earliest memories at the orphanage, about Miss Hattie's kindness, about the fear of the fire. She spoke of Caleb arriving like some wild creature from the woods, overwhelmed and lost. She described how Prudence had transformed chaos into order, how this ragtag family had built something real from ashes and determination. When I think about my future, Mary said, I see myself here, helping to run this place, maybe one day opening another farm orphanage somewhere else, helping other children the way I was helped. I don't see myself in fine dresses at fancy parties. That's not who I am. Thornton listened, really listened, and gradually his expression changed from grief and frustration to something like understanding. You're not coming back to me, are you? He said quietly. I don't know you well enough to come back to, Mary replied gently. But maybe we could start over, not as father and long-lost daughter trying to recapture something that's gone, but as two people getting to know each other. I'd like that, Thornton said, his voice thick with emotion. I'd like that very much. Over the following weeks, Thornton became a regular visitor to the farm. He came not to demand or persuade, but simply to be present. He brought supplies they needed, not gifts, to bribe Mary, but practical contributions to the community she loved. He funded the construction of a proper schoolhouse. He donated books for the children's education. He hired a teacher to come twice a week to instruct the older children in advanced subjects. And slowly, carefully, he built a relationship with Mary. They talked while she worked in the kitchen. He listened to her teach younger children their letters. He watched her gentle patience with little Sarah, her organizational skills with the household, her growing confidence as a young woman. One evening in late summer, as fireflies danced across the fields and children played in the last light of day, Thornton sat with Caleb and Prudence on the porch of the main building. "I came here thinking I'd reclaim my daughter," he said, "that I'd take her back to the life she was stolen from. But watching her these past weeks, I realized she wasn't stolen from a life, she was stolen into one. Everything that happened, terrible as it was, made her into this remarkable person. And this place, this family you've built, it's extraordinary." "Thank you," Prudence said simply. "I want to help," Thornton continued, "not just with Mary, but with all of this. What you're doing here, raising these children, teaching them skills and values, giving them a real chance at life, it's more important than anything I've done in business. I want to be part of it." "What are you suggesting?" Caleb asked. "I want to fund a new building, a proper dormitory with separate rooms for the older children, a real kitchen, a dining hall, a schoolroom. I want to ensure this place has the resources it needs to not just survive, but thrive. And," he paused, emotional, "I want to do it in memory of the daughter I lost and in honor of the young woman she became." "We can't accept charity," Caleb said firmly. "These children need to learn that you earn what you have." "It's not charity," Thornton said. "It's an investment. In return, I want you to promise me something. Promise that you'll expand this model. Take in more children who need homes. Create a place that will outlast all of us. And promise that my daughter Mary will always have a place here as long as she wants it." Caleb and Prudence exchanged glances, that wordless communication of couples who know each other's thoughts. "We promise," Prudence said. Construction began in September. Thornton hired the best builders, and under Caleb's supervision, they erected a beautiful 2-story building with proper rooms, glass windows, and a stone fireplace in every common area. There was a large kitchen where Prudence could teach cooking, a classroom with desks and a chalkboard, and even a small library. The children watched in awe as their home transformed. The older boys helped with construction, learning carpentry and masonry. The girls helped design the kitchen and living spaces, contributing ideas about what would work best. Even the youngest children had roles, fetching tools and supplies, their faces glowing with pride at being included. But not everyone was happy about the farm's success. In October, Silas Crenshaw returned, this time with the county sheriff. He claimed that Caleb had stolen children who'd been promised to him as laborers before Henrietta McKenna's death, a complete fabrication, but one backed by forged documents. "These 3 boys here," Crenshaw said, pointing to Samuel, Thomas, and young Peter, "they were indentured to me legal-like before the fire. I got papers to prove it." The sheriff, a decent man named John Blackwell, looked uncomfortable. "Caleb, I have to investigate this. If there are legal indentures—" "There aren't," Caleb said coldly. "Miss Hattie never indentured any of these children. She believed in education and opportunity, not servitude." Then you won't mind if I verify the documents with the county clerk, Sheriff Blackwell said. Verify all you want. But Crenshaw's not taking these boys anywhere in the meantime. Crenshaw smirked. The law says different. Those boys are my property until this is settled. The boys aren't property, Prudence said, her voice sharp. They're human beings, and they're staying here. The standoff might have turned violent if Edward Thornton hadn't arrived at that moment, driving up in his carriage with his lawyer in tow. Sheriff Blackwell, Thornton said pleasantly, I couldn't help but overhear. Mr. Crenshaw claims to have indenture documents? That's right, Crenshaw said, legal and binding. May I see them? Thornton's lawyer examined the papers with a practiced eye. After a moment he smiled coldly. These are forgeries. Rather poor ones, actually. The seal is wrong, it's from Jefferson County, but Miss McKenna's orphanage was in St. Charles County. Different jurisdiction entirely. And the date on this one is impossible. It's dated 6 months after the fire. Crenshaw's face reddened. That's just a clerical error. It's fraud, Thornton said flatly. Sheriff, I believe you have grounds to arrest Mr. Crenshaw for attempted kidnapping and forgery. The sheriff, looking relieved, did exactly that. As Crenshaw was led away in handcuffs, he shouted threats and curses, but they fell on deaf ears. The children had been protected, and the law had finally worked in their favor. That night, the entire farm celebrated. There was music and dancing, special treats that Prudence had been saving, and a general feeling of relief and triumph. The children had faced a threat and come through stronger. Caleb found Samuel sitting alone outside, looking at the stars. You all right, son? Caleb asked, sitting beside him. Samuel nodded slowly. I was scared today, not just for me, but for Thomas and Peter. Crenshaw would have worked us to death in those lumber camps. I wouldn't have let that happen. I know. That's why I wasn't really scared. Samuel looked at Caleb. You know what Miss Hattie used to tell us. She said family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when things get hard. You showed up, Caleb, even though you didn't have to, even though it turned your whole life upside down. Best thing I ever did, Caleb said honestly. Do you ever miss it? The mountains? Being free and alone? Caleb considered the question. Did he miss the solitude? Sometimes. Did he miss the simplicity of a life where his only concerns were finding food and shelter? Occasionally. But did he regret trading that for this, for 50 children who called him Papa, for a wife who made him better than he'd ever been alone, for a purpose bigger than survival? No, he said, I don't miss it at all. This is where I'm meant to be.